I hope that all of you who joined us yesterday were able to reflect on what we learned from the different sessions, and especially from the documentary that left, I think, all of us contemplating the journey of walking El Camino de Santiago in Spain. I know it has for me. As a brief reintroduction, I am Lisa Carbajo, and I am the Executive Director of the Office of International Education at Miami-Dade College. This is our second day of our first virtual El Camino, a Humble Journey workshop, focused on human rights and how it relates to El Camino de Santiago in Spain. And with that, I would like to invite Dr. Gonzalez to begin with her opening remarks of the day. Thank you, Dr. Gonzalez, again for being here.
Thank you, Lisa. I really appreciate the opportunity, and thank you for that very, very, very kind introduction. That was really nice. It started off my day in a great way, so thank you. Welcome to all of you, to our students, who I just commend you for sticking with something despite the disappointment of not being able to do it physically. I think that speaks so highly of you for really being tenacious and wanting to learn in whichever way that you could about this humble journey. So congratulations and thank you to you students. I'd also like to welcome and thank our international guest speakers from Spain and Brazil today, Mr. Amaral, Dr. Solano Fernandez-Sordo, and Dr. Pereira Martinez. So thank you very much for being with us. We really appreciate it. I also want to mention and thank Mrs. Begonia Panea Lopez and Ms. Valeri Alvarez Jean-Petit. Hopefully I said your name correctly in terms of the Valeri, so I see your accent, from Where is Asturias, Spain. So thank you so much for supporting this program and making it come alive in this virtual environment. I want to also thank our long-standing partners from the International Solidarity for Human Rights, Ms. Sanchez Vegas and Ms. Sasha, for their great support and partnership and just showing how people who are dedicated to something can really make a difference. So thank you for that. You have all heard, I think, from time to time that MDC is democracy's college, and so a focus on human rights is our responsibility, is our obligation. If you're going to have a banner like that, then you have to put action behind it. And learning experiences like this are exactly that. It's actions towards a noble purpose.
It's my pleasure to present Dr. Álvaro Solano Fernandez-Sordo, and welcome.
Buen camino.
Buen camino. Thank you very much. Thank you for the invitation to be here and the presentation of Satan Deborah, and also the invitation from the Miami-Dade College. It's a pleasure for me to be here. I want to tell you a story. In relation with the humble. A humble kingdom, a small, forgotten place in the Dark Ages in Europe, which discovered something that changed the destiny of Europe and make this continent a new destiny for millions and millions of people across the years. But we today are going to walk this way to Santiago from Oviedo. The way to Santiago de Compostela from Oviedo is 12th century old. Actually, the road is earlier if we refer to the existence of the communication route between the center of Asturias, all Europe, and the end of Galicia, the Finisterre, or the end of the earth, for the Romans. Since the time of prehistoric men and women of the ancient world and the Roman Empire have already made this trip. However, 1,200 years ago, this path turned into something else. It became a route with a name of its own because of the destination it led to. It ceased from being one more way to be the way, the Camino de Santiago. Since the 9th century, this path began to be walked by thousands and thousands of men and women who left their homes, sometimes very far away, and start their journey with their sights set on the destination, Compostela. And I hope that as soon as possible, with the end of this pandemic, you will come to Spain to do the Camino. You all. You will catch a plane in Miami, you will arrive to Madrid possibly, and from there perhaps a second plane to Oviedo. You will visit it, and one day you will walk to Compostela, where you will arrive 15 or 20 days later. There, you will catch a plane again, and in a few time, you will be back in Miami. That, until recently, was impossible. There were no planes or trains to shorten the trip. The Camino de Santiago began at home, and if a man from Paris or a woman from Poland want to make a pilgrimage to Santiago, their journey could last months or even years. It was a true adventure, but for centuries, the dangers or fears of the journey did not stop the pilgrims, and with their steps, they were making the itineraries from all corners of the world, from Europe and beyond, to Compostela. That is why there have always been, and will always be, as many Caminos de Santiago as pilgrims go there. Yours will be the path from Miami to Santiago, and today we are making a virtual historical path. Among all of them, there is a special one, because it was the first. It was 1,200 years ago, and a king, humble king from a humble kingdom, was the first to go to Santiago, to see the apostle as soon as the news reached to him. He went from Oviedo to Compostela, to Santiago, and set the route of what we still call the primitive way. The mark or several ways to Santiago. Well, this is the primitive way we call today. But before knowing the history of how the Compostela sanctuary came into being, we must know what was happening in this corner of Europe in those dark medieval centuries. Surely you have all heard about the Roman Empire. When the empire was gradually disintegrating and disappearing from all corners of Europe, different kingdoms were born. In the case of the Iberian Peninsula, the Visigothic kingdom of Toledo. The Visigoths ruled in what is now Spain for 3 centuries. Then they disappeared because a new invasion reached the peninsula. In this case, it came from the south, and it was the logical expansion of the Islamic Empire. The effect was a very quick conquest, and in just 4 or 5 years, they dominated the entire peninsula. However, in the north of the peninsula, an area of difficult access because it's surrounded by mountains, as you see there, soon became a focus of rebellion. It was Asturias. The leader of this revolution will be a nobleman from the area, named Pelayo or Pelagius. He decided to rebel against the invaders. Local people decided to proclaim him king. That is why Pelayo, accompanied by a few warriors, took refuge at the top of a cave in the mountains, and there he awaited the arrival of the enemies. And a few Asturians, led by Pelayo, achieved victory. This was the so-called Battle of Covadonga. It was the official birth of the Kingdom of Asturias. This was the first independent kingdom of the Muslim control in the Iberian Peninsula. Several generations later, Pelayo's great-grandson moved the capital and decided to put it in a city that he was going to rebuild, here, the city of Oviedo. This was King Alfonso II. Also in this time, the discovery of the tomb of the Apostle Santiago will take place in the westernmost end of the kingdom, here in the now called Santiago de Compostela. And this king, Alfonso II, will become the first pilgrim that made the Camino. It turns out that, according to the legend, Santiago may preached Christianity in the Iberian Peninsula before Santiago died, of course. For this reason, when he was executed, disciples decided to take him there to prevent his body from being desecrated. His 2 main disciples, called Teodoro y Atanasio, shipped the lifeless body of Santiago in Israel and crossed, as you see, the Mediterranean Sea to bury him in the farthest corner of the then known world. So, after a long journey, they were able to reach Galicia and bury the body of their master, here in Finisterre. It can be said that Christians of the peninsula could not show a particular devotion to the Apostle Santiago in the following centuries. Remember that Santiago was buried in a place that had been forgotten, and no one remembered him. This is what happened, according to legend. At that time, when Alfonso II, this man, Payo, he had been living in the woods for almost 3 years. Looking up at the sky in the middle of his prayers, he found that the stars did not stop moving and new stars appeared from the earth. The following nights, the same story was repeated. You see here in a medieval picture the representation of Teodomiro Episcopus discovering the 3 tombs of Santiago and Teodomiro and Teodoro y Atanasio. Payo and Teodomiro went to tell the king, who, as I told you at the beginning, had moved his capital to the city of Oviedo. It can be said that they made the Camino for the first time. Teodomiro and Payo went there and requested to see the king immediately and gave him the news of the discovery. King Alfonso, who was very religious, could not contain his joy and immediately, with humble, decided that he had to go to Galicia himself to see the miraculous discovery and pray before the body of the apostle. Alfonso went with them to the tomb from Oviedo, becoming the first pilgrim of Santiago. That Alfonso wept at the grave, and we can almost imagine what he could say. Probably something like the following. So this is the famous field of stars that I have heard about so much. We will call it Compostela, Campus Stellae, field of stars. And he decided to build an church around the tomb of Santiago. This is the origin of the cathedral you will see now in Compostela. Thus, Alfonso II became the first pilgrim. He was the first to travel almost 200 miles, that separate Oviedo from Compostela to visit the tomb of the apostle. So it's my intention to leave the time for all the questions you need for the history of the origin of the Camino. And also I apologize for my very bad English,
Thank you. We welcome you back. And actually, aside from welcoming you back, we want to visit over there next year. So thank you so much. And yeah, stay tuned for more collaboration. We look forward to our continued work together. And thank you so much again.
Thank you, really, for the invitation. It was a pleasure for me, and we keep in touch for everything you need. If you hear with pleasure my bad English, you are very prepared for the Camino, because for me it's important, the historic part of the Camino. So
and your English is not so bad. Trust me, your English is not so bad. We completely understand it. So thank you so much.
It was a Santiago's miracle, in fact.